space for conversation around women's health through the lens of naturopathic and Eastern medicine. I am Sandy Ross, and this is Her Earth Medicine Podcast. This podcast is multi-leveled. Episodes for patient education to graduate practitioner level. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you gain value from this episode. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Her Earth Medicine Podcast. Today I'm going to be chatting with Jo Formosa, who is an inspiring international practitioner with over 25 years experience in Ayurveda medicine. Jo has studied Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, and also incorporates neurostrategies with diet and nutrition. Jo is the clinical director of Back to Health, which is an Ayurveda practice in Brisbane, which she established over 15 years ago. Jo has also partnered together with the internationally acclaimed wealth expert Roger James Hamilton, where they have co-created Health Dynamics, which is one of the world's first systems to link your health, your wealth with your happiness to help ultimately make their way higher to better health and well-being. So today we're chatting all things Ayurveda with Jo. Let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Jo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, Jo. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. And I hear you have a very fantastic audience.
Thank you so much for joining us. And yes, we do. Jo, let's start off by hearing a little bit about your journey, because I think it's an amazing way that you integrate everything. So I'd love to hear how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my journey sort of started when I was like 14 years of age, actually. I had I'd hurt my disc when I was playing softball, and I'd had some really bad back injuries, issues. And I went to see a practitioner called Wesley Clark at the time, and he was a remedial therapist. And he pretty much put me back together. And at that point, I went, I want to study this and I want to help many people. So I went and obviously when I finished grade 12, I went to study at the Australian College of Natural Medicine, which is now called Endeavour. And I went to study remedial therapy because I was already involved in sport and I wanted to help as many people as I could. So I studied remedial therapy, and, you know, with my wisdom at that point, I went, I cannot be a remedial therapist for the rest of my life because my hands won't last. I need to put something else in there. So I went to study Chinese medicine acupuncture because I thought, well, let's put another modality in. And I'd always be injuring myself all the time. So I was doing some trampolining issues and I hurt my ankle, and I was having multiple physio appointments ongoing and nothing was working. And I went to have some acupuncture, and then all of a sudden my ankle was like better. And I was like, okay, this stuff really works. So that's why I chose acupuncture Chinese medicine. And then I was at a metagenics conference, and they were talking about, there was a doctor there, Dr. Rajan Kupan, who was talking about Ayurveda. And he was, giving us a lecture and about Ayurveda and how that links and how, it comes from, 3 different body types and doshas. And I was like, oh my goodness. I went up to him and I said, this is what I'm missing. This is the missing link. This is the gap. You must teach us this. And so then I went and did a 2-year course with him. And then I continued and I studied with some other Ayurvedic doctors as well, Dr. Ajit in New Zealand. And then I went to study with some doctors in India, and still they are my mentors today. And then I thought that wasn't enough. And I went, okay, so many clients have so many neurological issues and so many psychology issues where they're dealing with relationship stuff, or they're not following the diet because they are buffering with food problems, or they have all this self-doubt or self-confidence. So I then went and studied neurostrategies with one of Anthony Robbins' head coach, Steve Linder, in America. So then I linked all those different modalities together, and then actually put it together that was in my clinical practice. And then I met a guy called Roger Hamilton, and then we co-created a product called Health Dynamics, where we linked the mind and body type using Chinese medicine and Ayurveda together to build where we are today.
Wow, what a beautiful journey to get to where you are. That's actually quite similar to my story. I was treated, I think I was actually 9 years old, by a therapist, and that inspired me to go on and study at a young age. So it's really nice when you get that early flair in life for what you want to do.
Wow, yeah.
Okay, so Jo, would you mind sharing us? We're going to focus predominantly on the Ayurveda aspect, but at any point feel free to talk about the TCM side of things as well, because we will have Chinese medicine listeners. But can we start off by just going through what is Ayurveda?
Okay, so Ayurveda is the science of life. So if anyone knows Deepak Chopra is an Ayurvedic doctor, but he didn't start that way. He was an endocrinologist and his father was a cardiologist. So he got sick of treating people with drugs. So he went to study Ayurvedic medicine, and then that was it. He was convinced no longer was he going back to the normal Western medicine. So Ayurveda comes from, derived from India, but it actually is not Indian. If you think like Chinese medicine comes from China, but it's not Chinese. It is coming from those countries. But the fact is, Ayurvedic medicine being the science of life, it is the study, and they actually say that it was the first medicine where it linked exactly why disease happens. So it goes into the causative factor that we are born with a certain body type. We have a DNA. We are all very different. We're all very unique, and that is built from 3 different doshas, which is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And if you go before that, it's linked from the 5 elements, not the 5 elements of TCM, but the 5 elements of Ayurveda, which is air and ether, fire, water, and earth. And then they build up into the constitution, the body types, and that's how it all links together.
I studied a yoga teacher training in Rishikesh back, I think it was 9 years ago, and alongside the yoga course, excuse the rooster in the background, I did a short Ayurveda course, and for myself, I found it a little bit confusing from the TCM practitioner side of things because of the elements, and just it contradicted some things from my perspective. So it's really amazing that you have found that the two can work so well together. So I'm very interested to dive into your mind and find out how you connect it all. So could we maybe start off with the doshas and just give our listeners a little bit of an understanding about what the doshas are?
Yeah, definitely. So if you look at the dosha in how we look at the 5 elements, so the 5 elements are space. So space actually is like the first element because there is nothing. There's a nothingness. So something has to go into that nothingness. So every cell in our body comes from, first of all, space. So there's this empty gap, there's this space, there's this surroundings. So every molecule in our body has the different ability to build that. And then it moves into air element. So then, in a cell, you need the insides to be moving. And then when they move, that creates the air. So both of those elements, space and air, creates the dosha Vata. So Vata is the number 1 lead dosha. If Vata is not working, none of the other doshas work. Okay. So you always must, first of all, control Vata, because it is the space and the movement of everything. So Vata has they all have qualities. So Vata is more light, it's more mobile, it's circulating, it's moving. It works with our nervous system, it works with our circulatory system. You'll see someone who is more Vata body type who doesn't sit still. They're always moving. They have fast metabolism, fast digestive system. They can eat multiple times a day and not put on weight. They have pretty much in their head a lot. They are always thinking, they're always moving. You'll sit next to them in a cinema and they have to move their body, right? So you'll see kids that are Vata. They're like little monkeys having to climb all the time. They don't sit still. Their metabolism is more weaker because it's more variable. So they can't eat a lot. They can only eat small meals and then digest it. And they can't eat things that are more like their dosha. So where Vata problems happen is if they eat more cold, raw, dry sort of foods, so crackers and different things, because it will build more constipation, more bloating, more problems. So the Vata person will always come in with all these digestive problems, and they go, but I'm eating really well. I'm eating all raw food. I'm eating all organic. I'm eating salads. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not great for your constitution because it's an imbalance. So everything in Ayurveda is like Chinese medicine, that you do the opposite. So if someone has these elements and you need to nourish them and give them warmth and nurturing and all that sort of stuff. So that's the Vata. Then we move into the Pitta. The Pitta is made up of fire and water. So this is where the heat comes. So if you have air moving in a cell, the air creates friction, and then friction creates heat. So that's the next evolution of a cell comes. So then the friction comes and the heat comes, and then there's metabolism. So there's digestion, there's transportation. So Pitta's job is to metabolize, transport, and digest to be able to give those minerals to the rest of the body. And the water element is to make sure it goes around the tissue and goes into the function and gets those nutrients to all the deeper cells. Now, a Pitta person, when you meet a Pitta person, they have more like ready complexion, more sensitiveness in their skin. They can be overheated. Don't get in front of them if they are hungry, because they will knock you out of the way to get to the food, because when they're hungry and they need food now. So they're more of a hot body type. They demand like attention. They demand like everything organized, everything structured, everything their way. Sometimes if they're imbalanced, it's my way or the highway. You'll see their pantries all organized, their desk is all organized, everything. Where Vatas are a little bit all over the place, but Pittas are all very structured. So their metabolism is like they usually hungry for mealtimes at a very specific time. These are the type of client that will say, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they will do it perfectly. So they're a little bit competitive. They're a little bit like, not obsessive compulsive, but they like things done very well and perfectly. They can be a bit hot, so they can overheat easily. So you need to cool them down, and they can be very competitive. So when they're doing sport, you need to have them to do some things that are not so competitive, so they're not so imbalanced. But they'll have problems like inflammation, acidity, all these indigestion. So it'll happen first in the digestive system, then it will go into the skin, inflammation, hormones, and all those types of things. Then the last body type is kapha. So this is where it's made up of water and earth. So again, the water is the movement and it's the holding of the structure. So a kapha person is more heavy and dense in nature. But whenever you're having the evolution of a cell, it must come to a form. It must come to a solid structure, because that's the earth element. So you'll see a kapha person is very dense, very structured, very high muscle. They have they can put on weight easily, so they usually have problems with their weight. The Pitta one is more athletic. They're pretty more straight up and down, but the kapha person is more curvy, more like they've got a lot more water. They've got beautiful complexion, beautiful skin, very oily, nourishing. They don't age easily because they have Oprah Winfrey is a typical kapha. So gorgeous, beautiful complexion. Their metabolism is more slower because earth and water element is slow. It's heavy, it's dense. So they don't need to eat much, but they tend to eat because they want to hang out and they overeat. So they can eat like 2 meals a day, where a kapha of Pitta needs to eat 3 meals a day and a Vata needs to eat like 6 meals a day. And so that kapha, we have to move them because they can be sluggish, they can be lazy, they can be like, maybe you should turn the fan on because I don't feel like doing that. So they have this sense of everything is slow, everything is deliberate. When they're imbalanced as well, they will go into the emotion of withdrawal. So they will hold back, they will want to sleep, they won't get out of bed, but this causes all their imbalance of heavy head, foggy head, and all those different things. So this is how the different elements show up in the dosha, and this is how it's called evolution of the cell, and in every person is a certain quality, and to balance that quality is to do the opposite. So if a kapha person is holding more weight, you need to make more different foods and spices that will actually help them to move that, and a pitta you need to cool them down, and the vata you need to warm them up. So that's how it all comes together.
I love it. Amazing.
In a snapshot.
I think I was diagnosed by the Ayurveda doctor I studied with as a kapha vata. Okay, thanks so much for sharing about the doshas. I find them so fascinating, and I actually find them a little bit more broken down into individual and specifics than the Chinese medicine elements. I think they do definitely go into a little bit more depth. Can we talk a little bit about the food types that these... So you mentioned a little bit, and I know because I'm the kapha type, I think the oily foods and all that sort of stuff weigh us down and make us more heavy. But do you think you could just go through the 3 doshas and maybe just touch on a few of the specifics with food?
Yeah, so when you look at the 3 doshas are like the vata, pitta, kapha. But when you look at the body type, there are 10 body types. So you could be what's called monodosha, which means dominant in vata, dominant in pitta, dominant in kapha. It's very rare. it doesn't happen very often. They're quite imbalanced because they don't have something else to be their secondary. Most people are what we call bidosha, which means they have one lead, dominant dosha, like pitta and then kapha second, or vata first and then kapha second, or whatever. So there's going to be a leader and there's going to be a secondary one. We have all of the elements in our body. They're just in different combinations.
Yes.
And there's one which is called tridoshic, which means you have pretty much equal of them all. And again, that's rare as well. So when it comes to balancing the different body types, first of all, people always say, I want to know what I should eat because I'm a vata body type. It's one of the worst things that people can do. So just because you're a vata body type doesn't mean you should eat a vata balancing diet, because you might be a vata body type, but you're kapha imbalanced, which means you're carrying too much water and earth element and your body is imbalanced. So first of all, what we say in Ayurveda is we need to digest the ama, digest the toxin. So if the toxin is in the body, you need to digest that, metabolize it and get rid of it, because when the toxin is attached to the dosha, then it's called some agni, some ama. So some ama means that it's attached to the dosha. You need to separate it so the dosha imbalance can be eliminated from the body, and then therefore the person doesn't have it. So for example, if somebody is like got a vata imbalance and they have constipation and bloating and different things, and they have toxins that attach to that, and they have stickiness of constipation, and then it's stuck. So that means the ama is stuck to that dosha. So we need to digest that stickiness, digest and get the digestion working, separate it, and then the body can eliminate that excess air and space element in there, and then the person will feel better. And how we do that is, first of all, we metabolize and get the digestive fire working. So Ayurveda will always talk about, first of all, build the agni, build the digestive fire. Once the digestive fire, it burns the toxins. Once the toxins is moving, it can separate the dosha, and then the dosha and the toxin and everything can be eliminated. Then you've got more of a pure cell or a pure body to work with. Then you can build it up so that they can, if you're a vata person, you should eat more warm, unctuous, nourishment food. But if you have ama and you do that, you will make that person worse. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so that's on that level first. But then if we want to go into more specific, so if you are a vata person and you are having problems, the very typical thing we say for vata is avoid the raw, cold, rough, dry foods. So salads, crackers, dry foods, processed foods, eating on the run, eating irregular, not eating like skipping meals. The vata will skip meals, so they'll have a lot of space. And then the pitta person, we try to keep away from the fire element. So chili, fried foods, oily foods, tomatoes, mangoes, anything that is more heating to the body. And the kapha, we will keep away from things like the sweet, the heavy carbohydrate, the heavy meats and red meats and different things like that, oily products, like too much fried foods and different things, and even tomatoes, because it causes some swelling and inflammation as well. So there's particular things that we know. Eggplant is also not great for the kapha because it's heavy and sticky. Banana is not great for the kapha because it is sticky and it produces more sinus and more nausea in the stomach as well. So
yeah, okay, great. So a lot of crossovers there with the Chinese medicine philosophy too. Very much associated kind of with the spleen element, with the digestive fire, and I guess the agni, which is the digestive fire, and then the correlation with the ama, which I think we call like dampness in the Chinese medicine world. And is it true, I think the ama shows up as the same like the dampness in Chinese medicine on the tongue, and that's why the Ayurveda's practitioners always recommend the tongue scraping?
Yeah, so you'll see definitely, Ayurveda always talks about and same as Chinese, the tongue is related to all the organs, right? So you know how in Chinese medicine there's tongue diagnosis, in Ayurveda there's it's slightly different, but it's similar. So scraping that toxin off the tongue, that's the most dangerous toxin in the morning. And if you scrape that off and then you have lemon, ginger, honey type drink to actually start digesting the metabolism, gets everything going. But I agree, when you're looking at the spleen element in Chinese medicine, which is also coming from, excess dampness in your body normally today, but it can also come from deficiency as well, which then causes from the kidney channel as well, which is excess water problem too, so that you start to have this correlation start coming together. And we see, the adrenals are causing so many people's problems now. So they definitely all start to come together. But as soon as, I still use acupuncture as well. In Ayurveda, there's something called mama points, and the mama points and acupuncture points are very similar.
Oh, wow.
So we use the mama points. There's 103 mama points. And so if someone has like a digestive fire blockage, it's very similar to the spleen channel, of what we would use a hot bolus and we'd heat it, not necessarily moxa, but we would use the ginger and ajwain powder with all these different herbs, and we would do it that way. Or we'd use an enema to pull it out of the colon, to empty the colon so the metabolism would work. So yeah, just a little bit different changes.
Yeah, so the panchakamas, they're fun, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, and I love how you touched on how there's, a constitutional type, but it doesn't necessarily mean to eat like that, because we can use the spleen as an example in Chinese medicine. Someone might be spleen deficient, craving a lot of sugars, so we don't necessarily want them to eat more sugars because they're craving it, because the flavour associated with the earth element is sweet. So sometimes it's about finding the correct types of those sweet foods, and also working with the other elements about building them up so that there's some more tonification to the spleen. So I can definitely understand where you're coming from with understanding there's a combination of things, and if you just eat one dominant element, it's going to throw the other elements out. Very true.
Totally.
What about, is there, I know this is kind of going a little bit more into what I was just saying than with throwing the elements out, but are there specific herbs that you would recommend maybe daily for people that maybe have a constitutional type in, say, the kapha or the vata, and just off going with what you said, like more the heavy, is it the elephant they call the kapha?
Yeah, but people don't like being called an elephant.
Yeah. The gentle elephant, I think, is it? Gentle elephant.
Gentle, because elephant has more elephants aren't fat, right? They're very strong structure, but they're not actually
creatures.
Fat. And they're vegetarian.
Yeah, yep.
So a lot of people don't sort of realise that elephant is so big, but it's vegetarian.
Yeah,
so.
no, I have no problem with being associated with an elephant. But yeah, could we maybe touch on, because I know there's some beautiful teas, and they're even available, I've seen in health food shops where they have the doshas on the tea. So are there a couple of things you could recommend to someone that might be kapha or vata or pitta, just to include in their diet, that might be a little bit tonifying and strengthening for their constitution?
Yeah, there's something in Ayurveda which I always share with a lot of my clients, is called CCFT. So this is something that you can just get from the spices from your local supermarket or markets or whatever. Organic is obviously best, so if you can get it. Cumin, coriander, and fennel, CCFT. So when you start having this, we use it in our detoxification program, and that's the very first tea we normally start with a client. The reason being is because cumin is like a steroid on your colon. So it starts to liquefy the inflammation, starts to cleanse out the body, and and all of these herbs start to really change your taste buds. So a lot of our clients say, when I start taking CC, I have no sweet craving. I have no craving. We don't try to tell our clients what not to eat. We try to just get them to take the tea and let their body decide what not to eat. We do advise, but we tend to like to get the intelligence of the internal cell starting to communicate to your brain, because if the gut, which is releasing serotonin, to 70 to 9% of serotonin, if the gut is clean and less inflammation, your communication to your brain to what you should eat is going to be better, right? So the cumin is it's like a steroid and it's a little bit bitter. Then we've got the coriander. Now, coriander is fantastic for the liver. So these are also, coriander is a cooling spice. So it's cleaning the inflammation. And if it's cleaning the liver, then what it's doing is detoxifying the liver, and you take this on a daily basis. And the third one is fennel. And fennel is really good for the small intestine to help digest and help to metabolize and help for you to absorb the minerals and nutrients. Because most of the people today, the reason they're craving food is because they're not digesting it. So they're not taking in those nutrients. They're not available to them. The only thing is, just for the listeners, if you have a uterine fibroid, or you have breast lumps, or you have anything that's an estrogenic problem, then you definitely don't take the fennel. You take the fennel out and you just have the cumin and the coriander. So we do that for like a good month. And then depending on the constitution, if someone has like this spleen that you talked about, low digestive fire, we put in ginger powder. So ginger is pungent. Ginger picks up the digestion. If someone has problems with cholesterol or burning fat or metabolizing fat, we put in fenugreek. And the fenugreek seed helps you to metabolize the deeper fat molecules, and also it's used for women for breastfeeding, so it builds that milk supply. Or we use ajwain seed. Ajwain seed is celery seed, so it moves the bloating and the air, and it helps the vata move down. So depending on the different constitutions, we use like a medicated tea that you can just get from the spice shop, and you can build your own little individual herbalized tea that's specific for you.
Great. That's so useful for our listeners to do. And would you recommend to drink the tea at a particular time of the day?
Yes. So we recommend boiling it if you can. Boil it in 1 liter of water with the lid on, and then putting it into a thermos and then having it hot and drinking it through the day before 6 p.m.
Oh, wow.
And you will pee a lot. You will cleanse out your bowel a lot. You will be moving stuff that you think, wow. We had one client who we've been working with, and she started digesting, liver flanks. So she was, things were coming out of her. She was like, where is this coming from? It's like, we had another patient of ours who took the tea and that's all he did, and he came off 2 blood pressure medication in that time. He's like, this is weird. And he got really dizzy and he had to go back to his doctor, and doctor said, we've got to take you off the BP meds. Took him off one. And then he went back to doctor. He was really dizzy, and they took him off the second one, only from taking that tea.
Wow. That's amazing. Those liver flukes are fun when patients send you photos.
Yeah.
They're like, what's happening? Is my intestines falling out? Okay, that's super helpful. I'll also add in that fenugreek tea I found, because I made a very kind of similar formula. I did add in a few additional Chinese herbs for blood building when I was breastfeeding. So I did a lot of the cumin and the fenugreek and the ginger and some like dongui and astragalus and a few other herbs. And I smelled a bit like a curry. So just giving a warning too that you perspirate the smell.
But the only thing about that to note is that you smell like that for a period of time, because that means the body is digesting the toxins and they have to move out. So we always say when you take the cumin, coriander, fennel, the CCFT, as soon as you don't smell, then the toxins have shifted. If you are still smelling, it's not because of the spices, it's because you have sour fermented toxin in your body that is now coming out through your sweat. So urine, bowel, your sweat, your breath, this is how you get rid of the toxin, and it has to come out. So you will stink if you are toxic.
Ah, interesting. I must get back onto the tea and drink until I don't smell then. Awesome. Okay, so how about we dive a little bit into the 5 elements, not the TCM elements, the Ayurveda 5 elements, because I'm very interested to discuss these. I think there is definitely some crossovers, but as you said, there's the air element, which we don't have in Chinese medicine, and I think there's a few differences there. So I'd love to hear whatever you'd like to share. We can start with one element if you like, but can we dive into the elements?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I talked about the air, I've actually got, I wonder if I can share, and you might be able to send this out. We actually mapped it. I don't think anyone has mapped it. Roger and I mapped the elements and linked them all together. So let me just
Do you mean the TCM elements with the Ayurveda elements? Oh, cool, yeah. I did try and do it. I actually taught a subject at Endeavour, which was the energetics of food for naturopaths. And so I was teaching Ayurveda and also the European style of traditional medicine with Chinese medicine. So I was trying to integrate them all, but I'm not very good at crossing them over, so I'm really keen to see how you've done it. There's a few, like you said, with the fire and the armor and whatnot. We definitely have those connections, but some of the other things I really struggled with, and I think maybe with the ghee and the milk and stuff like that, how it comes into supporting those elements is where I was mostly struggling to get my head around.
Yeah, so I can send you this picture later on.
We can put it in the show notes.
Pardon?
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect. So we linked, obviously, the element that Ayurveda doesn't have is the metal element, right? But the metal links with the lung and links with the, planet of Venus. And the other elements that Ayurveda doesn't have is the wood element, and that links to the liver and links to Jupiter, right? And so when you have a look at it, the metal element in when Roger and I work through it, because it also works with personality, the metal is always about the people who are steel energy, and they always ask how do we do this? So they're always analytical, they're always process orientated, they always like the data and the detail. That's how their mind works. And someone who is more wood element, so wood is like, before you put it, if you think about Ayurveda and, you know, you have like a fire, if you put wood on a fire that is not burning, then that wood just sits there. So something that we linked with the health dynamics that I co-created with Roger, if you have someone who is a wood person, like that's their dominant element, you know, in Chinese medicine, but it's more in their mind, they're always very creative. They're always thinking about what is it that we should be doing. They're always high visionary. But if you then put it on a fire that is not burning, then that creativity just sits there and nothing happens, right? So the same type of thing then happens in the body. So we linked it right around that when you have, we did a challenge actually, a 5-star health challenge, and I'm happy to send you the link so your people could actually go through it, because each day we did each element, and then we looked at how we linked it to the fire, you know, the ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And then, because you can't actually say that this is what it is in Chinese medicine, because they're very different. They actually don't cross over, except for the fact that we linked it to the Pythagoras, the Pythagoras theory, the theory of 10. And that, you know, Pythagoras said, here is all the information, you guys go work it out. All the information is there. And so when you link it all, the different elements, it links to the planet, it links to the days of the week, it links to the 7 colours of the rainbow, it links to the chakra system, and it builds through that whole process. So, you know, Agni is the fire element in Ayurveda, and, you know, in Chinese medicine, it's going to link to the heart, you know, so being in the fire, and the earth links to the stomach in Chinese medicine, you know, but the earth links to more the body in Ayurveda. So it's a big subject. I'm not sure that we can discuss this on the podcast because there's not a definite crossover, except for we crossed it over by the mind type and the body type. So that when the mindset works a certain way, that's a particular element, and the body works a certain way, and that's a particular element, and that's how we connected them both together.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's really interesting. It definitely has, I think, a lot more. I mean, there's probably literature and books out there that I haven't been able to come across that go into that depth in Chinese medicine like it does in Ayurveda. But I really love that connection there where you talk so much about the mind and the body and the crossovers through the elements. And obviously there's the integration through the 5 elements in Chinese medicine, but you just so nicely and poetically explain it from the Ayurveda perspective. Can you maybe touch a little bit more about some of the other elements? So you mentioned there the fire element, and you talked about what was the other one? The metal element a little bit? Well, the integration not being there from the Ayurveda perspective. So what was the other elements? You got ether?
Ether is space. So ether is like an emptiness. So let's say, for example, a woman has a hysterectomy.
Yes.
Right? He has now an empty space. What has to fill that space? Something. So air goes and fills that space. And then air travels around the body and then causes a lot of problems with joint pain and a lot of other issues and stiffness and things like that, because something has been taken away, so something has to fill it. So, you know, everything is in our body for a reason, but if you take one of those elements out, then it has to be filled and put with something else. And, you know, this is what happens when there's an over amount of something, like too much air in the body, then the person is going to have like bloating and, you know, pain and stiffness and all these different things. If they have too much fire in the body, they're going to have the acidity and inflammation and blockages. If they have too much space in the body, they're going to feel dizzy and detached, you know, from the planet, you know, and they feel like emotionally they're not very stable. If they have too much water in the body, there's too much sponginess, there's too much heaviness, there's too much thickness, if they have not a lot of clarity. And if there's too much earth in the body, they feel like there's more heaviness and a blockage of able to move and to get that momentum going, because the elements are overloaded, so they have to have a certain balance in each body type, and the way that we linked it with the Chinese medicine when we created Health Dynamic is Roger studied the I Ching, right? So he decoded that and then linked all of the elements. It's amazing what he did. He's just an incredible brain. He linked it and basically broke it up into the different elements. So the wood element is all about people who think. It's a visionary, people who create, people who are up and are very creative. And somebody who has more the fire element are people who connect. They're all about the blaze energy. So they want to be people around. The more extroverted, the more connected with, different things as well. And you'll have somebody who has more of, the tempo energy. So it's a little bit more of that earth energy. They have ear to the ground. The more grounded, the more centered, the more connected. So they like to do things where they map everything out. And the metal energy is more about the how. So it's the people who have a look at the data, the systems and the processes and the detail. Now, those different elements of the different mind have problems with their health as well in a particular way if they're overloaded. So the people who are always doing too many things, always data, and they can have more problems with their lung. People who are, doing lots of things on, high visionary and not connected, they can have more problems with their liver. People who are more like always go, they can have more problems with the heart. And the earth element can have more problems with the stomach. And the center element is the water element. And the water element means flow, means kidney, means this is the why. Why are we doing something in the first place? And it's about your connectedness to your purpose. So he decoded that whole thing and linked everyone has a mind type and everyone has a body type. And then that's how we combine them together.
Lovely. And so what about with the organ association with the 5 elements in Ayurveda? Can we touch on them?
So in Ayurveda, there is a bit. We started to decode it a little bit because if you have a look at like ether, Akash, it's all about like the brain, because it's about like there's a space, there's a movement, there's that process. The organ element with the air element is all about the circulation, the lymphatics, the blood supply, the movement. The fire is all about the digestive organs. So it's about like the pancreas, the small intestine, the liver, like how do we digest and metabolize. The water element is all about more of the body and about all of the structure of the tissue, the joints, how everything is cohesiveness and how everything is sort of coming together. And the earth element is all about the bone structure. So about how everything is surrounding and supporting and doing that. So it becomes more of not necessarily just one organ. It's systems, about what those organs are doing in the body. Yeah.
I love that. It's actually putting it into more systems, which, it's more functional really when you look at it from that way. Cool. Yeah. I love it. It's great.
I like that.
Okay, so is there anything else you'd like to touch on with the 5 elements? Because I know it's a very big subject and we could probably chat about it for a few podcast episodes and you're going to leave us some great resources for it. But is there anything we've missed that you haven't covered that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think the biggest thing is know that the elements have a process and they're all important. They can't, one can't work without the other. So it's not about saying, oh, this is the most important. The creation, because the 5 elements in Ayurveda come from the Panchamahabhutas, which is it's basically comes from the consciousness. So, the Prakriti and consciousness, that's how basically the 5 elements are built. And Ayurveda goes into a lot of detail from that. And then those 5 elements are broken into the 3 mind types, which is your sattva, rajasic, and tamasic, which is your enlightenment, your doing, and your collectiveness. It's like, everything has to come together as a cycle. So they're all just as important as themselves. So you must respect them all. I think that's probably the big thing.
Lovely. I love the way you integrate it all so nicely. Okay, so may I ask, where did you study when you went to India?
So I studied with actually at a place called Ashakti. So Dr. Smita Naram is a very famous pulse reader. So she got trained by her teacher, who actually left his body at the age of 120 in a meditation process. And but she trained with him and he taught her pulse reading. So I'd already done my Ayurvedic training with Dr. Rajan Cooper and Dr. Ajit in New Zealand, did all the structure, but I went and mentored and was with them. And I sat in clinic for 2 weeks doing pulse reading. So we saw about 100 patients a day. And Dr. Hemang, her head doctor, she told him that he had to mentor me and answer any question that I asked, and this was 9 years ago. So he's been my mentor for 9 years. And after 1 month, he said, Dr. Smita, what did I do to you? She just asked me so many questions, but why, but why, but why? And because Dr. Smita had a plan that I was to mentor him and he was to mentor me. So she wanted him to be an international training doctor. And if he could answer every of my why questions, he could answer any question in the world to any patient. And he's their number one head touring doctor now. So her training worked for him and her training worked for me. And they are still my mentors. So they have a group of 40 doctors there. And she is still my head teacher. She's like my sister now. Dr. Hemang is like my head teacher. So Ayurveda is so beautiful in the way that, it's passed down from teacher.
Yeah.
Just like Chinese medicine, it's passing down. But when I met Dr. Smita, she was a female doctor. She loves sport. She was really passionate about business. And I just connected with her because it was something that I needed to be able to develop. And she's always just mentored me as a sister, a teacher. And I was very lucky to have that. So now my doctors, I have doctors in my practice. Now I mentor them and they just ask me questions about why, but why, but why. And I'm like, okay, now it's coming back.
I love it. And what location was that in India?
So that's in Mumbai.
In Mumbai. Oh, okay.
But they have clinics all around, they have quite a lot of clinics all around Mumbai and India.
Yeah.
And then we did a doctor's retreat just last year in Goa. So different. Yeah.
I have a good friend who works, I don't think he's working there anymore, but some homeopathic doctors that used to come and practice over in Bangkok in Thailand and came over and taught all the medical doctors about homeopathy, and then they would come over as visiting practitioners, and they're from Mumbai in a clinic called The Other Song. So lots of fantastic practitioners coming from there. 9 years ago, perhaps we were there around the same time, actually. I was up north, though.
Nice.
Okay.
You've got your roots in both Chinese and Indian. Huh?
And interesting, I didn't do much in the Ayurveda world, but I touched on it. I also did a 2-week mentorship over in the Chinese hospitals where I had just a private doctor for 2 weeks on pulse diagnosis. So it was really interesting that you said that, because I had the exact same experience, which is great. And yeah, I think I was 22 or something, and I talked his ear off with all the questions. So it was really...
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing too, because I had to unlearn Chinese pulse to learn Arabic pulse. They're totally different processes, because Ayurvedic pulse has 360 different combinations, and there's different depths. You feel the different subdoshas, because there's 5 subdoshas of Vata, 5 subdoshas of Pitta, 5 subdoshas. So you know exactly the imbalance, which organ, where it is, what's going on. You can feel the blockages in the heart. You can feel so much stuff.
Amazing.
That's there. So it was good.
Could we maybe touch a little bit on the panchakarmas? And do you use them with your clients?
Yeah, we do panchakarma here in the clinic. Not so much, because it takes a lot of dedication from a client. It's a 3 to 4 week process. It is better if you live in, because the client is completely taken out of their environment and they can just be with themselves and be with their body.
Yeah.
But panchakarma is basically pancha, it's like the 5 big, cleansing processes. So it uses things like nasya, which is the cleansing of the upper head, neck, channels. It uses things like vamana, which is induced vomiting, which you can't do in Australia anyway. It has the bastis, and the bastis is the elimination. They use a Vareshan process, and the Vareshan process is to digest the pitta, the heat, and then you will pass between 20 and 30 bowel motions in the day. The vomiting that they give you can vomit up to 20 litres, because they give you quite a lot of, you basically take the formula in and you vomit, but it's a preparation for your whole body. And also you have all the oleation treatments inside and outside. So you have the body treatment inside, outside with the oleation and the steam, and you have the internal ghees. So everything is done in a certain process, in a certain stage, and you have to be very careful, because if you stuff it up, you can put the toxins in the wrong channel. So everything must be digested, metabolized and liquefied to come to the stomach, to go to the digestive system, to clean out and go through to the bowel. And it shouldn't be coming out in all different places of the body. Some people go, oh my God, I've done panchakarma and I have all this skin condition and whatever. It's been administered wrong, so it should happen step by step, step by step. So we have patients who are very, very seriously sick with tumors and different things. If we know they need at least 4 to 6 weeks, we send them to India, because the fact is they need to be out of their environment. We have done them here for clients, but it means they have to come and go every day. And that puts a little bit of vata stress on their system. So we do more about what's called a purvakarma detox, which means we soften, loosen, mobilize using enemas, oils, treatments, and food and herbs and process. But we don't sometimes do the full version on a client, because of the fact of what needs to be done on that client's process to have a good result. So
I think if I was doing the full purging process, I'd like to be in a place where it's totally dedicated to supporting the cleansing process, because so much can come up, so much can come out, so many emotional shifts. And I think it's also a very missing part of how we practice in the West, because even with the Gerson therapy, which is used for cancer treatment, they have the enemas. You're doing 5 coffee enemas a day. So there's some, I think that's taken from traditional knowledge of the panchakarmas and associated that with, the treatment of cancer for detoxification. But there's not too much else we can really prescribe in the West. Although there are some very gentle panchakarmas, and I can't remember the name, but we did one in the yoga teacher training, and you probably know the name, where we threaded a piece of string, and I couldn't do it, Jessie, my partner, did it. We threaded a piece of string up our nose and coughed it out the mouth, and then it's to remove the dampness in the body. Do you know the one I'm talking about? And you actually, it's like, how people can put a piece of spaghetti through up their nose, and it's disgusting. Right. I couldn't do it, but I remember everyone in the yoga class pulling this stuff out, and they'd pull it out, and there was all this mucus that would come out and snot, and it was a gentle part of the panchakarma.
I would rather you do nasya to have someone do that.
Is that neti pot?
No. Nasya is a very specific process where we massage all the sinuses. We
lovely.
Use very special oils, and we use hot boluses to actually open up all the sinus channels, and then we use steam, and then we use turmeric fumes to basically heal all of that membrane, because most of the time people have a sinus problem because there's dryness in the tissue, so the body is producing all of this mucus to try to heal, and people go and get rid of and use saline and use neti pots and use different things, but they're not actually solving the real problem. They're just making the problem worse. Where if you go in, nourish, cleanse, and get the body to naturally put good quality mucus there, then there's the nourishment, so there's not less vata, there's not so much dryness, there's more that moisture, and then the person doesn't have a problem anymore.
I love that. I'd much prefer that than the string up the nose. I might be coming for a treatment for that. It sounds delicious. Do you use neti pots? Are they something that you prescribe to your patients?
Ayurveda doesn't use neti pots because of the fact that, this is the kapha channel in the upper head and neck region. So we will always use things to basically open up, and sometimes when you use the neti pots, you're putting the water, you're putting some, saline, or you're putting some salt or something to it. So you've got more chances of dryness, as opposed to we'll use mainly special oils, or we'll use oils with a certain root. So let's say I had a patient yesterday who we've been using it. She's been doing it at home. She's in her 60s or 70s. She's having problems with memory, and she's also having a lot of problems with sinus. So we halve it with a special nose oil and a special mind root, which is a ghee, and she puts it in so it goes straight to the pineal pituitary gland, where it allows the memory, and her memory has already improved even over 1 month. So.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. What about heat packs and heat lamps and that sort of stuff?
Fantastic. Heat packs is really good because it takes away the vata. So example, you know how everyone in the West talks about ice, like let's use ice for inflammation. I fell down the stairs in India and I broke my foot, and the doctors immediately got hot water and dumped my foot in and out, in and out, in and out, and did this whole process. And then they put this medicated paste on my foot, this black paste, and then put cotton on it and then wrapped it. And then they redressed it the next day. And then they used the hot boluses and the pinda sweats and everything like that. And I'd fractured the cuboid bone, which one of my tendons in my feet broke the bone apart, which is a pretty bad break apparently. And anyway, I was supposed to be in a moon boot for like 6 weeks, and I was in a moon boot for 1 week. And it was completely healed. Wow. So it just shows you the fact of how quickly the healing process works if you use processes that actually support that channel and that tissue.
Yeah, and that's very much like the homeopathic theory with like cures like.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Well, yeah, in Ayurveda, it's, in the sense of food, it's the opposite. But in these type of case, because you want to, get rid of the healing, start stimulate the healing, the vasodilation, vasoconstriction and things like that. It's pulling it in and out, got a massive amount of blood flow for the healing process.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, you mentioned ghee. Could we maybe just finish up by talking a little bit about ghee? Because I think it's something that not many people, I was talking to a patient yesterday about using ghee. I can't remember why, but I think he's got MS, that's why. And I was actually talking to him about when I was practicing in Bangkok, and many of my patients over there were vegetarian and they did not eat egg. And I was always going, where do they get their B12 sources from? How come they're so intellectual? How are their minds so sharp? Are they not chronically B12 deficient? And then when I started looking into the diet a bit more, I found the big use of ghee there, and I think that's probably where they get their B12 source from. So for our listeners that don't know what ghee is and how to use it, could you maybe touch a little bit about ghee?
Yeah, so ghee is clarified butter. So in the sense that it's had the milk solids taken out of it. So when you boil unsalted butter and you simmer it down into a process, you can make ghee. Now, you can buy it off the shelf and things like that. A really beautiful ghee, if anyone wants to get one, is Sol ghee, S-O-L.
Yeah, that's the one I use.
Yeah, well, she studied with Dr. Ajit, actually. If you listen to her story, the reason she took ghee is because she wanted to have a baby and she couldn't have a baby, and so Dr. Ajit talked to her about the ghee and the nourishment and fertility, and then Sol is her first baby's name. Aww. So that's why it's Sol ghee. So it's a really lovely story. So ghee comes from the fact of Ayurveda is ghee is a carrier. It helps to build also the Agni, the digestive fire. So when we talked about the element fire, it has a very high boiling point. So it's not sticky. It's not like an oil that gets stuck in the body. So it metabolizes it. It nurtures the tissue. Ghee also helps support the immune system. So when ghee goes through all of the channels, it's gathering the toxins and allowing it to be digested and processed and moved through those channels. And it always comes down vata. So when it comes down vata, it's always coating the channels. It's coating the tendons, ligaments, bones, muscles, tissues. Because not to go into too much depth, but Ayurveda have 7 tissues in the body, and it takes 36 days to nourish all those channels. So it's a step-by-step process to nourish the rasa, which is the lymphatic, the rakta, which is the blood, the mamsa, which is the muscle, the meta, which is the fat, the asti, which is the bone, the maja, which is the nervous system, and the sukra, which is the reproductive system. And then the last thing from all of those byproducts of those channels is the immune system. So when you have a look at ghee, it actually helps your microbiome. So there's some beautiful YouTubes around it about ghee with getting the microbiome and helping you to actually digest good quality bacteria. So then if you have got good microbiome, you are protected against so many different elements and bugs and different things, and your body becomes its defense system for itself. So Ayurveda, some of the treatments that they have is they mix the herbs in the ghee, and then the herbs become more powerful because they can travel through the system much quicker with the lubrication and process, and you gather and get more into the deeper channels of the body without being stuck.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I was given some ghee with the haldi turmeric to consume. Yeah. I can't remember why, because it was like 9 years ago or something. But yeah, I found it quite beneficial and tasty too. I love it. And I always love using ghee in my cooking.
Well, ghee is always really good too because if you use it in your cooking, and one things I always say to people is it makes things so tasty.
Yeah.
So putting that ghee on and just even drizzling a little bit onto your veggies with a little bit of salt and pepper and fresh herbs, your veggies will become like divine. And you're like, this is awesome. I can eat veggies all day long. So, having that, it's an element of, it's sweet, so it's an earth element. So it also gives you so much depth, so much nourishment. But if you don't overuse it, ghee is actually even used to remove cholesterol. So, it does have that high boiling point. So people get worried about it. But we've used it in so many of our clients, diabetes, cholesterol, fat problems, all issues, and everyone, doesn't have any issues. So it's, the king of the Ayurveda medicine, I would say.
Definitely. And tasty one too, which is always a win.
Exactly.
Okay, I'd love to just ask you one last question, maybe a bit more personal. What are some of the things that you use from Ayurveda in your everyday daily living, rituals that you like to do, whether it's part of your moon cycle or yoga practices? Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So every day for me, I always wake up, usually when the sun comes. I don't wake up with an alarm clock. So like this morning I was up at 5. That's pretty normal for me. I will but I will do yoga and meditation. Definitely is always in my weekly or daily practice. And I always start my morning with tongue scraping and oil pulling. So I use sesame oil for oil pulling because it actually is very good for vata, and it's very good for cleansing the upper neck and head channels, and it's very good for the mind. And then I will have the morning drink of lemon, ginger, and honey. And I will regularly, not necessarily have the CCFT, I will have it sometimes, but I'll have more ginger water because to really stimulate metabolism, digestion. I see a lot of patients. I do a lot of content. I do a lot of international work. So I really need to keep that fire there. I will take herbs every day. Ayurvedic herbs specifically to take care of my mind, to take care of my digestive system, to take care of the balance. And I will regularly, at least 2 to 3 times a week, have mung dal and veggies. I'm vegetarian because I'm a pulse reader, but I will have like 2 cleansing days at least. And this is what I teach my clients, 2 cleansing days per week, because then your body can naturally on a weekly basis just cleanse out the toxins as well. So, and then a few times a week, I'll do an oil massage. So I'll massage my body with an Ayurvedic oil, which actually helps to bring down the vata. So that's a little bit of my daily routine. And because my body type is more Pitta Kapha, I exercise daily because I love it. So, yeah, I will do I swam this morning for, a couple of K. I will ride, I will run sometimes if I feel like it. I used to exercise a lot in cycling, competitive. But now that I'm too busy in practice, I just keep fit. So just a variety of different things.
Lovely. Okay, I actually have one more question, if that's okay. I just thought about it when you touched on the herbs and also for the mind. Now, I just want to hear your perspective a little bit about a lot of people are getting into withania, ashwagandha, and I think there's so many great properties to ashwagandha, but it'd be interesting to just hear a little bit from the Ayurveda perspective on the herb.
I'm glad you asked that question, actually, because I have a lot of people who come to me, I'm taking ashwagandha and and I've been told this is fantastic, and they have so much ama. And they're taking ashwagandha with ama. So if they have toxin and they're taking a sweet herb, it's going to make the mind more dull. So I said, it's beautiful, but what I need to do is first of all clear the toxin, make sure your digestive fire is working, make sure everything is working, then you can take ashwagandha. Because ashwagandha is nourishing and supportive and more of an earth element because of the sweet element, fantastic for the mind, but sometimes will cause an ill effect because they've got too much toxicity.
And I think that's one of the problems I find is a lot of people get it isolated just as ashwagandha, and where in Chinese medicine we don't do that, and in Ayurveda medicine we don't necessarily do that. It's a combination, and the herbs work as a synergy, so you might be giving other things for those other elements. And because I've had a lot of people, they come in, they might be on a good particular brand of ashwagandha, but it's not necessarily creating the effect that they would hope it would. So I think it's a very important
and as a practitioner, if you feel their pulse after 1 month, 2 months of taking it, you'll feel the spleen being a little bit as Chinese medicine, the spleen dampening more. And then they wonder why the chi is going down, which in Ayurveda is the Agni, like the chi movement in the body. And they're thinking, well, I'm not feeling so great. I was feeling good. And so it's about making sure you're getting those combinations right.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why it's always good to reach out to practitioners if you need that extra help. So can I ask, now you've got a few courses, online programs, is that right? Do you want to maybe touch on them?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different ways. So we have people who just come and, see one of our doctors or have a consultation just to get that. And then you can do like a health dynamics test. You can find out specifically what is your mind and body type. So that's sort of like the starting point. And then we have like a detoxification program that we run, which is a 28-day detoxification program, which is our more transformational program. That's when people are really serious about taking their health to a whole nother level. But if people are interested, it's first of all, like, get in touch, have a consultation, find out your constitution, and then go, okay, what is it that I want to achieve? And then maybe you're ready for a detox, which we would send you into that direction. Or maybe you just need to do X, Y, and Z to actually make sure you're stabilizing your body first.
Okay, and I'll make sure to put all the links so that people can get in touch in the show notes.
Yeah. Well, and one other thing, because I know you have the practitioners on here, is we are developing, we've got a certification program that we have of how to understand health dynamics and how to learn about how to integrate the Ayurveda knowledge in as health practitioners. I've got a practitioner here. She's a naturopath and an Ayurvedic doctor, very unusual combination. But she went to study naturopathy because she didn't know she could practice Ayurveda in Australia. So she sort of did both. And she's such a great asset to our company because she understands the naturopathic herbs and she understands the Ayurvedic herbs. So I think as practitioners, the more we have in our toolkit, the more we have in our belt, then you can see what that client needs at that point, and then help them with their best way to the best avenue to get them to where they want to be.
Absolutely. And I think in particular that would be valuable, that course for the naturopaths, because the Chinese medicine practitioners, they do understand the energetics and the elements, but I think they do have a big missing piece of the puzzle in naturopathic medicine, going to the emotional aspect, the energetics of food and the energetics of herbs, and that needs to be integrated more to really help give that holism picture when we're treating patients.
And I think, and I don't know what you think, but to my opinion, and it may only be my opinion, but what I'm seeing coming out of the colleges is a lot of the training now for the naturopaths, particularly they're being trained in symptomology.
Yes.
So, especially in like metagenics, not even metagenics, but the different conferences that you go to, if you have this condition, you follow this protocol. If you have this condition, you follow this protocol. People are not in a cookie cutter. Like, they're not in a protocol. So it's really important to know what's the causative factor of the disease first, and then start to fix what is their symptom by giving them something for their symptom, but don't stop. You need to address the cause. And that's where I think some of, the practitioners, even Ayurvedic doctors that are coming from India to the West, are getting caught into that paradigm. And this is why people go to a doctor. They go to a doctor to get a Band-Aid. Yeah. They come to us to get the solution of the lifestyle change and things like that.
Definitely. And I think also functional medicine is taking a big place in the naturopathic world now. And I use a lot of functional medicine. I do genetic testing, I do microbiome testing, I do hormone testing, but I certainly integrate it still with the traditional knowledge that I've learnt throughout the years of these Eastern medicines. And I think sometimes that can be also getting a little bit lost when we start going down the functional medicine route and start looking at, using tests and prescribing off the test base only, rather than going back to the person, their constitution, and how we can integrate the combination.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the functional tests are amazing. There's so much more that we can see now, which is so awesome. So, yeah, it's great. And I think the other two things, if you are a practitioner, you're a new practitioner, we link with integrated doctors. So we've got them on our team, and having them on their team to do additional blood work and pathology is such a great asset to us as practitioners. So definitely try to find yourself an integrated doctor. And if you're a patient, find yourself an integrated doctor who doesn't mind doing some additional tests for you, because that sometimes you can catch something before it becomes like a deep seed. And once it's a deep seed, it's much harder to treat if you catch it at the very surface before it becomes a big problem.
Absolutely. Prevention is better than cure.
Totally. And
Jo, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on Ayurveda. It's been really interesting to hear your insight. And like I said, I love the way you explain everything. It's very poetic. So I'll make sure I go and check out some of your great resources too.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to leave, any take-home messages that you'd like to leave about Ayurveda medicine with our listeners before we wrap it up?
I think probably the biggest thing I would say, and I always say this to my client, there's a guy called Sri, and he runs a program called The Art of Living, which is the happiness program.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And Sri says health is a dynamic expression of life. So are you dynamically expressing yourself with what you were born at? We are born at a unique combination of our elements. Don't try to be somebody else. Be you, know you, and work within those elements and be the dynamic expression of yourself. And don't compare yourself to anybody else.
I love that. That's beautiful. Jo, thanks again so much for joining us on the Her Earth Medicine podcast. It's been very insightful chatting with you.
Thanks, honey. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. I have been a practitioner of naturopathic and Chinese medicine for over a decade. I have a master's degree of health science and I am an academic lecturer at Australia's leading natural medicine college. I am available worldwide online for bookings. Simply go to sandyrothhealth.com.